the German health ministry says it has a legal obligation to assess the risks before the AstraZeneca inoculations can resume. The rationale boils down to this: vaccination is a question of trust, not compulsion. Every person vaccinated must be sure that all the facts about the vaccine are being conveyed transparently and thoroughly and not withheld. So fast forward to some of the madder corners of the British media, and the polar opposite is unfolding. So that is an example of individual governments, in this case the German one, abiding by rules and regulations that are much higher than our own, or much higher than some other European countries, in the context of the fear of legal action. But even as you read into the small print of it, it's unfortunate, because the risk of this tiny increased risk of a certain type of blood clot is, in the context of the population as a whole, it doesn't even belong on the same page as the risk posed by not rolling out the vaccine as quickly and as widely as possible. But if someone who did die of a blood clot demonstrated that it had been linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine, then the government would be sued. And that's why the German government has done what it has done. The German health ministry has made this decision, which will probably, certainly in France and Italy, that suspension will be dropped tomorrow. And I would remind you again that the European Union regulator, so the European Union body, the EMA, has said that there was no sign the vaccination had caused blood clots, which both Macron and Draghi, the French and Italian premiers, have described as encouraging. So once again, as evidence of it not being in any way proof that Brexit was a good idea, 17 European countries have paused use of the jab in recent days, as has a few countries that are not European, although obviously if you haven't got the doses, there's not much point in suspending the administering of them. But that means, off the top of my head, about 10 EU countries haven't. It's almost as if you can do what you want as an individual sovereign government, despite being a member of the European Union. But Macron, I think, is a bit of a muppet. Forgive me for that lazy labelling. I think Macron was politically motivated in the early days. Here's another reading of the situation that I don't know you'll see anywhere else. Macron's failure, France's failure, and specifically France on this, because Macron said some really stupid things. France's failure with vaccines is politically very damaging to him, and he, as ever, has Marine Le Pen snapping at his heels in looming presidential contests, prime ministerial contests, presidential contests. Oh, check your small print before you start talking on the radio. And he did indulge, I think, in what's the French equivalent of Little Englanders? He did indulge in Little Frenchmen type politics. He did try to turn the vaccine into a nationalism issue by poo-pooing the AstraZeneca vaccine. Again, the over 65s issue was, when you read into the small print, actually technically justifiable, technically comprehensible. They hadn't tested it on people over 65 to a sufficient degree to state that it's safe for over 65s. But again, the risk of not administering it was almost certainly greater than the risk of pulling it, or taking it, over 65s taking it. But again, Macron did make something political out of this. Merkel categorically didn't, but Macron did. And that then spread a bit into what you could describe as a sort of vaccine skepticism. So Emmanuel Macron rendered the AstraZeneca vaccine suspicious, which means that any statistics or any suggestions, any science that then comes forward, which casts genuine, albeit negligible, doubt on the AstraZeneca vaccine, the population responds to in a very different way from how it would respond if Macron had kept his trap shut. So there's another argument that says this is actually a suspension of administering the AstraZeneca vaccine designed to increase public confidence in the AstraZeneca vaccine, because Emmanuel Macron had already undermined it for completely spurious and entirely political reasons. But obviously in Brexit Britain, you're not going to be able to read that in the Daily Mail or the Daily Telegraph or the Daily Express or the Sun or any of their Sunday titles. And most broadcasters aren't going to do it. And the BBC probably won't go near it either, because they're so terrified of this government. You now find yourselves, and we don't know how many listeners we've got at the moment. We were looking at about 1.3 million a week, I think, before the coronavirus kicked in. We've overtaken Radio 4 in London, and you, as a listener to this programme, now have a better understanding of the AstraZeneca vaccine situation than anybody else in this country. You're welcome.